us today. Today's presentation is The Road to the Green Card, presented by David Nachman, Esquire, and Ludka Zimuchek, Esquire,
Perfect.
Daca
That's great.
Kalani, Zimuchek, NPZ Law Group, Visa Serve. So we look forward to this presentation and having them share some very valuable information with you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Thanks for inviting us, first of all. It's always a pleasure to be able to support the hometown university, Rutgers. And Ludka and I obviously do work for academic institutions across the country. So obviously it's great to always be sort of back at home. And so the first thing I want to say is that, really thanks goes to you for the invitation to have us here. But I think that it's important for us to point out to your students how most academic institutions across the country do not invite private lawyers in to speak to the students. We work in a handshake relationship with the International Student Office at Rutgers and other academic institutions, because the responsibility for the international students there's a lot of overlap. And it's really like a handshake where you're handling them up to the end of their F1, where then you pass the baton to either an in-house counsel or a private law firm who's going to help them with non-immigrant visa classifications or work permits that they're going to be able to get in the future before they go on to the green card. So today's presentation is going to be a little bit about where the handshake ends, really, for the F1, and where our jurisdiction, if you will, picks up. And it's important for the students to know this, because if they're in a really good position to be able to explain the process to their prospective employers, then if the employers feel comfortable, they're going to be able to offer them jobs and opportunities in the future. And really, that's what it's all about for folks who want to stay here in the US. So my name is David Nachman. I've been doing this for 30 years. Seems like yesterday. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm going to turn it over just to Ludka to say a couple of words. Ludka has been working with me for 15 years, long 15 years, right, Ludka? Yeah. And so we've been handling all aspects of immigration law, every aspect along the spectrum, which we're going to talk to you about. And so, Ludka, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that, we concentrate on anything related to immigration. So not just students, but obviously life afterwards, employment-based immigration, family-based immigration, removal proceedings, asylums, so anything related to immigrations. Many students get married, they fall in love, they get married to US citizens, so that happens as well. Before we proceed, I just want to mention, if anyone has any questions, I just wrote it in the chat. Please feel free to write questions. We are going to take questions as we go, written questions. And if time allows, we are going to answer some questions at the end. And if we are not able, because we only have 1 hour, feel free to send us an email. We'll provide both of our emails in the chat.
Yeah, I think that just off of that, I just want to say that we don't stand on ceremony. I think Lydia knows that. Lydia and I have been working together for a couple of years now. And what it is that, we understand that you have questions, and we'll be happy if we can answer those questions off the top of our head to do that. So, and we also provide a discounted initial consultation fee if you do need to get deeper than, a quick question, which we might be able to answer off the top of our heads. So all you have to do is ask for the Rutgers/Lydia discount, and we're more than happy to give that to you. So no worries at all. So with that, also, Ludka, we're going to post our email address, addresses, and also the website. So anyone who's on this webinar is, more than welcome to visit. We do put out a bi-monthly newsletter. I think, Lydia, you may get it. And what we do is in that newsletter, we try to keep everyone apprised of what the new developments are, in the immigration arena. Please feel free, if you don't like it, if you want to sign up for it, please feel free to do so at our website. If you don't like it, just hit delete. but it's a really nice resource. A lot of people have complimented us on our ability to try to keep everyone apprised of what's going on. And lately, certainly over the last 6 months, there have been just a whirlwind of developments. So
And it is very important to check your sources as well.
thank you.
So
Yeah.
we notice that a lot of students that we work with, they read a lot of blogs, they go to chat rooms, and I'm not saying that sometimes it's not helpful, but generally speaking, it creates a lot of issues because there are a lot of incorrect information. So make sure you check your sources. Government websites are always good. Schools website, they provide a lot of information that would work. But even for some law firms information, you don't know what type of law firm it is. Always check your resources. It's always the safest to go to government's website. So it's a uscis.gov, Department of State's website if you're checking, embassies, CBP, that's for port of entries. So make sure you check what you're reading.
So I think what we'll do is we'll start the presentation with this slide, which is sort of halfway through our presentation. Luca and I do many different presentations for academic institutions. The first part of this one, you may have seen a couple of slides that we rifled through. Those had to do with some of the changes that were happening over the summer and how they affected the students and the proclamations and the travel bans and the COVID-19 health-related travel bans. So we're more than welcome. We're more than happy at anyone's request to provide information on that. But this particular slide is near and dear to us because what it is it explains the U.S. immigration law system in a snapshot. What it is it sort of explains to you how the U.S. immigration law system is a spectrum. And the spectrum begins on the left and goes over to the right. And it starts with, and if you understand how the U.S. immigration law system works, you're going to be poised to be able to ask and answer the right questions with regard to your future and ability to stay in the U.S.
Because one of the questions that we get, correct me if I'm wrong, but we get it all the time, is how do I get U.S. citizenship or how do I get green card? That's a question from students. And this slide will explain to you. If you understand this slide, you'll understand the whole overview of the immigration law.
Right. There are logical steps in the U.S. immigration law system. A lot of times, like Luke is saying, I'll get a call from an individual who will say, I have this nanny and I want her to be a U.S. citizen. But I'll say, whoa, slow down. You have a couple of steps that you have to go through in order to get there. So we're going to take you through those steps very quickly and then move on. But first of all, it starts with, on the left-hand side, individuals who don't have any status in the U.S. And so you might think that individuals who don't have status don't have any options, but that's not in fact the case. There are benefits that are available for individuals who either, for example, have entered the United States without status or individuals who have overstayed their stay in the United States. So some of those forms of benefits, for example, are Daca, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And this was a special program that was implemented under the Obama administration where individuals who were brought to the United States as children and stayed in the United States were able to get work authorization. The problem is that there's a limitation on the extent to which they can go and get the green card. But Daca is out there, and you should also know that there's been a lot of discussion about the possibility of Daca coming back online. So we're going to see what happens with that. The U visa is a visa that's available for individuals who are victims of certain crimes. So if you were the victim of a crime, and if you go online, you can actually see the types of crimes that an individual, who is a victim of a crime would be able to apply for. I think there's about maybe more than a dozen types of crimes. So if a crime happened to you while you were in the United States, and we do encounter students who, for example, are victims of felonious assault or victims of domestic violence and so on. And if you have a law enforcement agent who's willing to sign the documents, you can apply for a U visa. And the beauty of the U visa is that you don't have to be in status. You can bring yourself back into status in the US if you're out of status. So it's a nice little benefit. Also, there's another program called 245I, which if you made a qualifying filing before April 30th of 2001, you would be able to get a benefit by paying a penalty and adjusting your status in the US. Now, most people probably are too young to have filed actually, in or about April 30th of 2001. But what's really important about that program is you can inherit that benefit from your family members. So if, let's say, your father or your mother have applied, you would be able to inherit that benefit. And that's really tremendously valuable to you. And believe it or not, Luca and I, on occasion, we do encounter individuals who are able to inherit those benefits. Finally, there's asylum, which is that if an individual feels that there's a credible fear of persecution, if they were to return to their home country, then they are able to file and stay. And the only thing that we usually remind students if they decide to do that is that it's a good idea to maintain your underlying status, because you just don't know how that asylum case is going to go. We just did an asylum case. We just filed, or we're putting together an asylum case for an individual at an academic institution who explained to us that his family was involved with a certain political group. And so we felt that he had a credible fear of persecution. If he were to be returned home, that would be a problem for him. So,
but that is very important point, David, that, for those students that are interested in asylum, please stay in your F1 status. If your asylum application is not successful, nothing happens to you and you continue your F1 status. However, if you decide to use employment authorization that is attached to the asylum and you just let go your F1 status, if your asylum application is denied, then you're automatically referred to immigration court and you're going to end up in deportation proceedings. So it's much better and safer to stay and maintain your F1 status.
Exactly. And finally, which is not really on our list because actually Luca mentioned it before, and that's marriage to a US citizen. If you marry a US citizen, then you can get status in the US. Even if you're out of status, you can still marry a US citizen and get status in the United States. So there are certain nuances that are associated with that, because if you, let's say, are a person who's accrued unlawful presence, you may be able to apply for a waiver. There are certain types of things that you should be aware of that are, again, nuances to the marriage arena, but marriage to a US citizen is a great way, of course, to get the green card. Then, of course, moving across the spectrum from the left to the right, you have this form of status called non-immigrant visa status. Non-immigrants are individuals who are intending to return to their place of residence or return outside the United States. So that's what non-immigrant intent is about. So Luca, obviously we're talking to international students or those individuals who were international students who returned home, but tell us about some of the non-immigrant visas.
So first of all, it's very important to understand this distinction. Within non-immigrant category, we have two classifications. Number one, these are the purely non-immigrant classifications, such as students and J1s and visitors. So as you mentioned, David, these people, they had to show intent to return back to their home country and not to immigrate to the United States. Then we do have some classifications that we call dual intent, because they allow for immigrant intent as well. So it means that these individuals can apply for a green card as well. Probably some of the best examples would be H1b, L1, R, somewhat O visa. So these are good examples, and that's probably how we would take the student, is to first switch within a non-immigrant category to the dual intent visa status. Once the student obtains more stable, stronger status, then proceed on the immigrant side. So it's not the best idea to proceed from F1 to a green card. Now, while I'm saying that, of course, there are exceptions. You mentioned marriage case. I wouldn't worry about it too much unless student enters the United States, gets married in 1 week and files for a green card. That's a problem. There is a problem with the intent, because the government will see it that, the intent was to enter temporarily and to study, and filing green card within a week there would be a clash of underlying intent, and the government could see it as a fraud. So even with the marriage case, there are nuances. Now, I'm going to be talking about the employment-based green cards, because that's the question we get all the time from students who are on an OPT, particularly on the STEM OPT. Can I apply for a green card? And the answer is, it depends. There are many things that we need to look at. It's not a cookie cutter response. Number one, it's always important to look at country of birth. So China, India, those are the countries that are heavily
Backlogged.
backlogged, meaning it takes a really long time. For EB2 for India could be 10 to 15 years to obtain a green card. And meanwhile, the individual needs to maintain underlying status. So the 3 years of OPT will not help. On the other hand, if you have somebody from Germany who has a STEM OPT, 3 years may be more than enough to apply for a green card. So it really depends, and it's important to speak to the student and just find out what the circumstances are. But typically and generally speaking, the best route is to just change the status, for example, to the H1b. That's a typical path. And once the student obtains the H1b, then he or she can proceed with the green card immediately. This brings us to the next column, which is immigrant side, and that's a green card. That's a synonym for the green card. We have employment and family-based immigration. We get this question all the time. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but you could apply for as many types of green cards as you possibly can. So if you have mom or dad that is a US citizen, you can apply for family-based immigration. At the same time, if your employer wants to sponsor you, you can proceed with one of those employment-based categories that we listed. There are actually 5 of them. Even within employment-based categories, you could pursue 2 or 3 if you are eligible. It will just increase your chances, and just to see which one will be approved first. And lastly, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to ask you. So I think what you're saying, Lutka, is that let's say we have students who have family members who have applied for I-130s, and they're thinking about possibly doing an employment-based visa and the green card in the future. Is that something that can be done?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so there's no conflict.
Or there is no conflict, or there are different variations. For example, we have many students apply for H1b. While on the H1b, as I mentioned, they may have parents that applied for an I-130. So while they're on the H1b for the next 6 years, they may obtain a green card through family, not employment, even though they went with the employment route. And at the same time, the employer probably might have filed a green card petition for them as well. So the more chances, at this point time, it's much better to have more cases pending if possible.
And so, sorry, I took you off track there, but what is the last form of status that an individual gets? It's naturalization?
That's the citizenship. So typically it's 5 years from the time of obtaining the green card if you're married to US citizen. So even if you got your green card through employment, but you'll get married to US citizen, then it would be 3 years of wait time, and you can apply for citizenship. The question we get also is, do I lose my own citizenship? Well, it depends. You need to check with your own government. So US is okay with the dual citizenship, but it's very important that you check if your own country, there are some countries that will not allow dual citizenship. So it's, before you decide to proceed with citizenship, you need to check with your own country. Typically is just the consulate, probably. That's the easiest place to check.
Exactly. So great. So we'll move to the next slide. Perfect. So the typical march for an international student is, of course, that they have F1 international student visas. At that point, you're working with Lydia and her staff, and making sure that you remain in status, which is super important, especially in this environment right now, to ensure that you properly and timely file for your OPT, optional practical training, which unless you're a STEM is going to be 1 year. If you're STEM, you get 1 year plus a 2-year extension. And then you'll be looking out to doing the H-1B. So the H-1B, you'll be doing probably in the new year in March, and we'll tell you a little bit about that. And as Luca pointed out, after you have the dual intent, non-immigrant, long-term underlying status, you then start to think about the green card. Probably, again, if you're from a backlog country, sooner rather than later, in order to ensure that you maintain your underlying status long enough so that you can keep that status until you have the green card in your hand. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about H-1B visas, Ludka. Obviously, our office does a lot of H-1Bs every year. We do them for individuals who are OPT. And so we always talk to students and tell them that a good time to be talking to their employers is around now. So this is actually a very timely webinar, because this is a good time to start talking to employers about what will need to be done in the new year in order for these employers to be able to keep the skill sets, the important skill sets that they obviously have tried to avail themselves of by bringing students on in OPT. So what exactly is the H-1B, and what are the minimum requirements, Ludka?
So H-1B is for professional workers, and the minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree or its equivalent. So obviously students are pursuing their studies, but we can definitely look at their foreign degrees. Many students already have a degree, and even the experience is useful when looking at the H-1B.
Well, wait a second, Lucas. So you're telling me that if you have a student who's maybe a junior at Rutgers, that they may actually qualify for an H-1B? How could that be?
Many times, actually, they do. If, as I mentioned, if they have a degree from abroad, and some just may have associate, or it's a 3-year bachelor's, so then experience would be useful as well. We would do credentials evaluation, and if the degree is equivalent to the US bachelor's degree, yes, the student can proceed with the H-1B while at school, assuming that they have offer of employment. So that's important. When we say that student needs to apply for H-1B, it's really not the student. There has to be offer of employment, and it's the employer that will file H-1B registration and then later petition. So it's very important to understand that it's not just the US degree. Foreign degree could be used as well. Actually, we have many applicants that are coming directly from the foreign countries that they've never been here. So that's a possibility as well. And we just use credentials evaluation, again, assuming that is equivalent to the US bachelor's degree. But on the other hand, even if you have a degree, let's say you have master's degree, US master's degree, but the position itself also must require a bachelor's degree. So I'm sure you would ask me a question about the admin assistant, but if you have a degree and you have a high degree, and offer of employment is much lower, so it doesn't require a bachelor's degree, you're not going to qualify for the H-1B. So it's not just about what you have, but it's also what the position requires. So we typically look at Department of Labor, what is the minimum requirement for the position offered, but also it could be that the employer normally requires a bachelor's degree because maybe of the complexity of the job, or just because that's what they would request for the position offered. So that's something very important to remember.
Well, Ludka, I thought yesterday we were doing a presentation, and I thought your explanation about working in a gas station was really a good one, because you said, well, so if you have one person who's working as a cashier in a gas station, they're certainly not going to qualify for an H-1B because it's not a professional and specialty occupation. However, if you have an individual who, let's say, is doing the financing for or sourcing of goods for multiple gas stations, that individual might qualify for an H-1B because that's more of a professional and specialty occupation.
I actually have case like that, and it worked. So that's why I used it as an
It's a
example.
perfect example. Yeah, but it gives a student a sense of where they need to be relative to in an organization in order to be able to have a professional and specialty occupation. And I think it's important also at this point to let the students who are on this webinar know that the definition of specialty occupation has been under fire. There's a recent new rule that was proposed by the Trump administration to redefine specialty occupation and to make it much more rigid. So actually this slide tells you some of the specialty occupations. Thank you. I think, is that, Luca, are you doing the slides or is that Rajesh?
It is me.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, good. So thank you for going to that slide, because this gives you a sense of what we consider to be specialty occupations. And this is a non-exhaustive list, of course, chemists, biologists, engineers, physicists, and so on. But there are multiple others. And
is a teacher, we have a question here, is a teacher a specialty occupation?
Absolutely, I would definitely say so. And the way that you would figure out whether or not they're specialty occupations, at least the way I do it initially, obviously looking at the responsibilities is the most important thing and not just the job title. So one of the things you want to do is go to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. It's not a, it's a public document that's put out by the US Department of Labor. It's now online called ONET. But if you take a look at the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, there's what's called a specific vocational preparation code. Anything in excess of 7 is considered to be a professional position. Anything less than 7 is not considered to be professional. So that's a good rule of thumb. But the other thing is, Ludka, I mean, I don't know about you, but I answer questions from students every day where they just shoot me a quick email or a text and say, hey, I have an offer of this particular position. What do you think? And so, we can, given our experience, we can sort of let them know whether or not it's a professional position.
Also, it's very, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just got a question maybe 30 minutes ago where they were asking me if we can get H1B for somebody on OPT. And while the degree that this individual has is kind of rare and maybe not traditional for the position offered, but there is definitely a creative way to connect it. So that's very important, to connect the degree or major to the position. And you may have lawyers that are more rigid and will say no. You may have lawyers that are more creative and will try to make a connection. So it's not really black or white, it's kind of gray determination. These positions such as chemists, biologists, these are easy ones that anyone will tell you it is fine. But then you have some that is not 100% clear and you need to make arguments. So I just want to put it out there that it's not always black and white, because I've seen where, I thought it's a good case for H1B and maybe there was a different lawyer that thought, not as much. So also it depends who, is looking at the position, and, if there are more, even between the two of us, I think you would definitely stretch it more than I would. So it's not entirely black and white, but I think, as you mentioned, with the new regulations, it's going to be tighter. So whatever we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I don't think we would do it now, because it would be very difficult to get it approved.
Agreed. And I think the example that I like to give where we stretched it was back about 20 years ago. We were able, I had an individual who came in to our office who had a biology degree, and they were getting a job at the Gemological Society, and we did an H-1B for her. And I connected the healing value of gemstones. And that was our argument. We actually were able to get the H-1B approved. I don't think in this environment we would ever be able to make an argument like that, but that shows sort of how we have to connect the dots for the students.
So this year we had a new H1b regulations in place, and we were very nervous about it, but at the end it worked out pretty well. So historically, what was going on for the past, I think, 10 years, we had lottery. So we would file all the H-1Bs on April 1st. It was very stressful. All the immigration law firms in the United States would file everything. There were thousands of cases. Then the government would run the lottery. They would select 65,000 cases plus 20,000 for higher level, master's level and higher, and they would return all others. So what happened this year, instead of doing a lottery for all the cases, there was H1B, they created H1b registration. So employers, let me just pull up the slide so you can see here. So the employers would be able to register on March 1st up until March 20th for $10. It's a simple registration. There is no submission, no documents are submitted. It's an online registration. Then after March 20th, the government would run the lottery. And on April 1st, those that were selected would start filing an H-1Bs. There were actually some H-1Bs that were not used by people. And that's why in summer, I think around July, there was a second lottery. And we are just completing some of the cases from that second lottery. So as far as the timing, let me just show you here. That's why David mentioned now is the time for those in OPT to start talking to the employers, because on March 1st, the employer has to submit registration. Then April 1st.
Well, they have between March 1st and March 20th. Yeah.
Lottery is until April 1st, and on April 1st, the H-1B filing starts. The start date of the H-1B is October 1st. So it's, it's really great. I think in 2008, the government decided to start the cap gap extension. So for those that are expiring in May or June and file the H-1B, their work authorization would be extended up until October 1st. So that's what was going on this year. Obviously, there are more proposals. David mentioned the specialty occupation, prevailing wage, and another one.
The prevailing wage is big because what they did was they rewrote the federally mandated prevailing wages recently, and it's a proposed rule that is presently being litigated. We're not sure where exactly it's going to go, but what happened is the Trump administration essentially sought to eviscerate the H-1Bs by lifting the federally mandated prevailing wage. Now, the benefit to the government, of course, is that they get a bigger piece of the action, because obviously higher wages means more taxes for the federal government. But essentially what it does is it cuts back on the number of H-1Bs that US employers are willing to offer to foreign students, because the wages are going to be so much higher. So, but it turns out actually that when through recent studies that the government actually did the wages the wrong way, and they ended up producing very, very high wages without justification. So this again has been called into question and is presently pending in federal court. So it sort of remains to be seen as to whether or not there's a future for this or not. Additionally, they also talked about, and this, Lutka, just correct me on this, but they also talked about changing the lottery system to choose H-1Bs that have higher wages, which is crazy, because what essentially they're doing is discriminating against individuals who perform services, very, very important services, for lower wages. So for example, medical doctors who are serving in underserved areas, or individuals who are working for NGOs are essentially, they get lower wages for what they do. They do that because of psychic remuneration. They love what they do, and they do it not for the money. They do it for the goodness that they feel, for doing it. But the problem is that they're going to end up not being able to get H-1Bs and remaining in the United States. So
Yeah,
again,
Actually, it's just a proposal that came out on November 2nd. So right now is in comment period. So there are going to be comments until December 2nd. I think both of us agree that, that's probably not going to happen, but, we'll see. But that would be a huge change if that goes through. And I think this would definitely be litigated. So we are yet to see what's going to happen with this lottery.
Exactly.
Um,
So again, I think, as Lutka said, in terms of timing, now is a good time to be talking to, if you're on this webinar, now is a good time to be talking about, H-1Bs with your employer if you're presently in OPT.
So H1Bs are valid for 3 years, and with the possible extension for another 3 years, so typically it's 6 years. There are some possibilities to extend the H1B beyond the 6 years, and that's only if you would start the green card process early enough and your I-140 immigrant petition is approved, then you would be able to get the H1B beyond the 6 years. So this is typically very useful for our Indian clients, our Chinese clients, because of the retrogression that we mentioned, that it takes a really long time for them to get the green card. So we've had individuals who are on the H1B for the past 10 years, and they keep extending it because they are not able to get green card. There is a kind of line for the green cards for India and China.
Perfect.
Hold on, I don't know why it's
So part-time H-1Bs are something that could be considered. And actually, in light of the increase in the prevailing wages, part-time H-1Bs are definitely something to consider. And so I'm going to do this slide. Concurrent H-1Bs are permissible. That means that you can have two H-1Bs. So let's say you get an offer from Amazon and you get an offer from Google. You can do 20 hours per week for Amazon and 20 hours per week for Google. And then you have to have two H-1Bs that are running at the same time.
Is your chance the same when you're applying for part-time, or is your chance better if you're applying for full-time?
I found that again, I think out of experience, I can just say that I got as many part-time H-1Bs approved this year as I did regular. So it really just depends. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that taking a part-time doesn't decrease your chances.
Are you subject to the lottery every time you're changing your employer?
You're not. Actually, the way it works is that once you have the H-1B under the cap, then you can use what's called H-1B portability under Section 105 of AC 21, and you can actually move to a new place of employment upon the proper filing of a new H-1B with a new employer. And that's really nice. So you're not strapped, if you will. You can actually move your H-1B around. There are certain nuances that need to be taken into consideration when you're using portability, which we're equipped to be able to explain both to the beneficiary and to the employer. But it's something that you need to know about.
David, how does the student on OPT start even? How do they approach the employer, and which employers even sponsor? How does that work?
So that's a loaded question. Which employer sponsor? That's a difficult thing to answer, because a lot of times employers just need to be educated. That's the most important thing. There is a list online of employers who do H-1Bs. So obviously that's a good place to look. I'm sorry, say that again.
H1B Data Hub.
Data Hub, okay. So it's a good place to look for companies that are sponsoring, but companies that have never sponsored before can certainly sponsor. And again, it's our job, where we work with the employer and the employee using sort of a form of dual representation. As long as everything is, everyone's on the same page, we're allowed to do that, and to help the employer understand the benefits of being able to hire and utilize the H-1B on behalf of the international student. So, so that was, I think, your first question. You also asked, let's see, how to approach the employer. So again, we said this is a good time of year when the employer calls you in and does your end of the year review. what you probably want to say is that in addition to the fact that you've done such a great job for that employer, you say to the employer, oh, and by the way, if you really like the job I'm doing, there's something you can do for me, because in March, I'm going to have to register for that H-1B lottery. And so let's talk about doing that registration for $10. And then if I get chosen, then we can move to the next level, which is to submit the H-1B petition. And, I have legal counsel who I've talked to already who can, explain the process to you and how it works. Lutka and I have actually put together what's called a white paper, which is a very general description about the H-1B process and a checklist of the materials that we need to get from both the beneficiary and from the employer, and in order to do the H-1B. And we're more than happy at your request to provide you with that. All you need to do is send us an email and we'll be happy to provide that information to you. You can give that to the employer, and that helps the employer understand exactly what their responsibilities are going to be going forward if they do the H-1B for you.
So as I mentioned, the H-1B, with the H-1Bs, the biggest issue is that there are just not enough of them. There are only 65,000 H-1Bs and then 20,000 for US master's level and higher. So as you can see by numbers, it's really pretty bad. This year was pretty bad as far as the lottery. So you need to have some type of alternative plan. And one of them is cap exempt H-1B. So what is it, cap exempt H-1B? Well, these are employers that can file H-1B at any time. There is no numerical limitation. They can file it in January, in summer, without any issues. So those would be higher education, colleges, universities. They can file H-1B at any time. So if you're staying in academia, you don't have to worry about lottery. Also, any type of nonprofit organization that does the research. Again, they may not know about it, so it's important that you explore it. You can definitely ask them, but again, they may not know about it. And then it's any organization that is affiliated with
the academic institution,
colleges. So it's very important that you explore this, because as I mentioned, university, that's clear. But other companies and nonprofit organizations, oftentimes we notice that they don't know about it. And it's really, your job, our job to explore, are they 501c3? Do they do any research? What's the primary purpose of the organization? So it is something that it's definitely worth it to explore. And because of the lottery and the high numbers, we see a lot of cap exempt H-1Bs. So for those that are thinking of staying with academia or working for a nonprofit organization, that's something you should explore now. If you have a cap exempt H-1B and you never did the lottery, and then you get an offer from a private industry that, the company that would normally be subject to the cap, you would have to wait till March. The employer has to do registration, even though you have the H-1B, unless you keep your cap exempt H-1B. So for example, you continue working with the university and for 5 hours, and then you get concurrent H-1B with a company that would normally be subject to the lottery. That you can do. But the minute you lose the cap exempt H-1B, that would be a problem, and your H-1B.
Wait, Lutka, I'm confused. So what you're saying to me is that if I get a 2-hour-a-week H-1B with Rutgers University as, let's say, a teaching assistant, then I can do a 38-hour-a-week H-1B with Amazon?
Yes.
Is that really?
Yes.
Okay, and the regulations permit that?
Yes. So
okay.
Far, yes.
Okay.
Let's see for how long.
Great.
So,
that's very helpful.
Let's say you don't make it in a lottery. You cannot find any cap exempt H-1B organizations.
So you mean everyone doesn't win the lottery?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So
we have a discussion after the lottery, what do we tell students that
well, sometimes actually, Lutka, we actually have these discussions before the lottery, because some students may qualify for, they may even have really, really good O1 cases or E cases, even before they go into the H-1B lottery, we may want to talk to them about those options beforehand, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Especially for the O visa, you mentioned O visa. If we see that someone has a great resume, it's maybe better to take them with the O visa compared to the H1B, because all of these visas you can file at any time. There is no timeline. H1B is the only one that you have to file certain time, like you have to do registration on between, in March. So all of these you can file at any point. So the strategy here would be trying for an O1 beforehand. If it doesn't work, then maybe try for H1B, or the other way around. For those that O1 would be on a weaker side, we would try the H1B. If H1B doesn't work, then we would go with the O1. But let's talk about all of these visas. So we have some that are country specific. That are based on the passport. So not country of birth, but passport that you're holding. So
based on treaties, right?
Yeah, you may be a dual citizen. So for example, I'm just going to pick E3. That's for Australians. It's a work visa that is just for Australian nationals. TN, for example, it's for Canadians and Mexicans. It's not a dual intent visa, but it's a great option because you can keep renewing it indefinitely while you're trying to get an H-1B. It's a work visa as well. For those that are thinking of, yesterday we had a student that was interested in religious worker visa. So there's not even point to go to H-1B. You can just proceed with the R visa. There is no numerical limitation. You can file it at any point, assuming you have an offer from church or temple or any religious organization. And again, it's not just for ministers, but it's any type of religious.
Any traditional religious function, right?
So yesterday, I think we had a person, it was actually a Sunday school teacher. So another option here is O1.
And Ludka, if I can just ask you a question, religious workers, okay, they go to green cards very quickly, right? So that's another added value to taking someone through a religious worker visa, right?
Correct. After 2 years, they can go to a green card.
So I think what you're saying, so Ludka, it's really interesting. So what we're talking about here is kind of like maybe people can immigrate not necessarily based upon what their academic background is, but maybe there's something that they're doing like an extracurricular activity, which I think is why it's so important for us as immigration lawyers to have a full-blown initial consultation with someone so that we can understand their background and try to figure out what is the best way for them to proceed. So what comes to my mind is, and you'll remember this, is that we had a young gentleman who came to our office and started telling us about his business degree. And then it turned out that he was an Olympic bobsledder, right? But we didn't know that until he sat down and started telling us about his hobbies, right?
Yep.
And then you immigrated him not based on the business degree, but you immigrated him based upon the P1, which is an athlete who's involved in Olympic competitions, right?
One green card that you can self-petition. That's absolutely right. It's very important. We always ask about hobbies and we ask, are you married? What is your spouse? It's very important to see the full picture to understand what it is, because many times, you may have someone who is a professional dancer here and they are studying at Rutgers. I actually do know a student that was a professional dancer that just came to my mind from Rutgers. We would take that probably to O1B as an artist, and then proceed with the green card based on that as well. So there are people that are thinking about investing. They may be studying, but they are thinking of buying their own business or opening up a new business. That would be e-visa, but it's based on treaties. So it's very important to check if your country qualifies for e-visa. It's very easy. Just Google e-visa countries. You're going to get the whole list of countries. So most of the European countries, Canada, Mexico, Pakistan, Korea,
Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah, there are many, many countries. And, we're not talking about $1 million here. That, could be 100,000, 80,000, depending on the type of the business. But we had students that, decided to proceed, even though they may not have the money, but maybe the parents gave them a gift to either buy a business or open up and do a startup. So that we see quite a lot as well. What else do we see? U visa, we talked about. L1 visa. For L1 visa, you would have to go back and spend 1 full year in a foreign organization. So for example, if your family has a business abroad, you go back, you work for 1 full year, and then you come to the United States to open up a new business. That would be intra-company transfer, or you're working for the company abroad and that company already has a parent or subsidiary in the US. So that's an L visa. But the key here is that you need 1 full year abroad within the past 3 years. That's important. David mentioned the P visa. That's a great option, P1 for athletes. P3 is for activity that is culturally unique. So you may have student that is interested in some Indian dancing or is teaching or something like that. That would be P3. We do a lot of P3s. So these are just examples. We just wanted to show you that you need to think outside of the box. So it's not just the H1B. Sometimes there are better options than H1B. The key is to plan. You need to plan well in advance and understand what your options are. That's, I think, very important.
Exactly. And I think that we gave an example yesterday, Ludka, where an individual had come in and talked to you and I about a decade ago. And this gentleman told us that he was, number one, he was a choreographer at a church, a Slovakian church, responsible also for obviously the Slovakian dance and costume, which was put on during the Slovakian holidays each year. And so we came up with potentially an H1B, of course, but we didn't like that because of the cap. He also qualified for an O1B because he was an artist. He also qualified for a P3 because P3 is for individuals involved in cultural uniqueness. And what else did he qualify for potentially? I believe maybe, and a religious worker visa because it was at the church. So there you got an individual who had a particular position at a particular employer who had several different options. And so we finally, I don't even remember which one we finally did, but we got him a long-term non-immigrant visa. And then we moved him on to the green card. And now he's a US citizen, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
One question I have for you, David. Can you tell us a little bit about the O1B? I see somebody has a question here on an artist's visa.
Yes. So I think I quickly answered by saying that we do have a white paper that we can provide, but the O1B is for artists. There are 2 different O's. There's O1As, which are individuals who are extraordinary in their field. It means that they, are the top of the top. And then you have O1Bs, which are the artist visas that you only need to prove distinction or notoriety in the field. So it's a lower legal standard. So, and also with regard to sponsorship, you don't necessarily have to have an employer sponsor, but it can be an agent that sponsors. But there are different requirements for what you put forth when you do that. The O does also require what's called the Consultation Certification, where the individual has no objection, the labor union or organization that's responsible for that particular field has to give a no objection letter. So that's also something that needs to be done in the O visa context. But if you feel you might qualify for an O1, it's probably not a bad idea to, let us know, and we'd be happy to give you the white paper on it, and then we can drill down a little bit with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have about 4 minutes. So I don't know.
Let's maybe cover quickly the green card. I know that one of the students did have, a question about the green card classifications. Maybe we can just quickly explain the green cards, and then if Lydia wants us to come back and talk about the green cards more in depth, we can always do that in the future. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we, I think it was on our first slide that we started, we explained there are 5 different categories. And I think what's important for students to know that there are only 2 categories within all of these different categories that allow for self-sponsorship. Otherwise, you always need a company that will file the same as the H-1B, that will proceed and file with the green card petition. So the 2 categories that I'm mentioning is EB1 as an alien of extraordinary ability. So this is a very high standard. And I'm going to just put an example here, these are the things that we would be looking at: publications, presentations, awards, memberships, original research. So again, it's very high classification, but if you do have credentials and you qualify, you can file it by yourself. You don't need an employer to file it for you. And then this.
So I have a quick question for you, Lutka, because obviously Lydia told us that she's also responsible for some of the scholars, and J1s. What is the first part of your analysis when you have an individual who approaches you who says they want a green card, but they're in J1 status? How does that work?
First thing I would look at if they're subject to the 212E, which is, are they subject to the 2-year residency requirement? Because if they are, they cannot proceed with the change of status to the H1B, and they cannot get the green card. Even if they are married, we've had many cases that people were married to US citizens. As long as you have to take care of that 2-year residency requirement. So either get a waiver or go back to the home country and fulfill the 2 years. So that's very important point. That would be the first thing I would look at. Sometimes the government makes mistakes, so I wouldn't entirely.
What? The government makes mistakes? I can't imagine.
I wouldn't rely on what it says in the passport or on the DS form. It's important to double check it and really see, was it a government program? What kind of funding was it? Just, was it a skills list? It's important to double check it to just make sure that it's correct. And sometimes, I think last week I've seen a case where there was just it was a Canadian, there was no determination. So there was nothing, it was left empty. I don't know why. So that would be the first thing that I would look into. And just going back, so it's EB1, and then the second category for those that are interested in filing by themselves would be national interest waiver. It's a EB2 classification, and you can file it as a self petitioner. It's much lower standard. So for those that do not qualify for EB1, we would definitely take them into the national interest waiver category, assuming that we can prove that it's a nation's interest and they can advance the field. And we look at the resume. I think that's the starting point. So for those interested in national interest waiver or even EB1, I think the starting point is just for us to review the resume and see the credentials and give our opinion, if that's even a possibility.
And so the person who asked about H1b requirements, you can actually take a quick look at this slide. That slide that Luca just showed you would have been a good list of some of the things that we would be looking at. So what we have is we have EB1, EB2, EB3, and there's actually EB4 and EB5. EB5 is for investors, EB4 is for religious workers. EB3 is for skilled and unskilled workers. EB2 is higher level, mostly masters and individuals who have a bachelor's plus 5 degrees, 5 years of experience. And then EB1s, the idea, I think, and Luca, just check me on this, is really what we try to do is we try, if we can, to avoid the US Department of Labor, because the US Department of Labor process is very time-consuming and costly to the employer. So we do whatever we can to try to get our students into pre-certified classifications.
If possible.
It's not for everyone, but it's a great way to go if you can avoid, if you can avoid it. So that's really where our analysis will start. So Lucia, we posted this slide because it obviously gives our contact information. I guess we're coming up to the very end of our presentation, so I think we want to just.
Okay.
Okay.
Fun.
We want to remind everyone that we are, as I think you can probably tell, we're fairly informal. So please feel free to send us any questions. You can also send them to Lydia. Lydia can feel free to send them on to us, and we can answer them through Lydia if you feel most comfortable doing it that way.
You can provide a presentation to Lydia, and Lydia can distribute it to whoever needs it.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much, David, Ludka. We really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge on these very important topics. As they mentioned, I did place our contact information in the chat, so the presentation will be shared with me. Please feel free to reach out at that address and I will share the presentation with you. But any other questions for them, you see their contact information on the screen. Feel free to contact them as well. You can see how much knowledge they have and can impart to you. So we were very happy that they were able to take some of the time out of their day to help us out today and share this with you. So thank you again for everything.
Our pleasure. Thanks so much again for the invitation. I know a lot of your students are international. They shouldn't even hesitate to reach out for us, from wherever they are. If we can answer their questions, we're happy to do it.
Sounds good. Thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day ahead.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Bye for now. Stay safe.